Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. I'm Richard Jacobs, Executive Director of the nonprofit Finding Genius Foundation and host of the Finding Genius Podcast. In late 2016, I was rear-ended at 65 miles an hour by a truck on the highway, which sent me off-road into a ditch. The impact of the collision gave me a concussion and other injuries. At the hospital, a CT scan showed that I had thyroid nodules, which turned out to be cancer. It was then, when I had a biopsy of my neck, that I realized even if I was a millionaire, I wouldn't want a second or a third biopsy due to the pain and the invasiveness of it. And appointments at that time for thyroid experts were 3 to 6 months out. And I was worried about dying now, even if that was irrational. So because of this, I've decided to raise money to conduct a literature review on steroids, on the causes of anxiety and depression, a condition that affects well over 50 million people in the United States and hundreds of millions worldwide. Our goal is to create a codex, a guide that reveals all possible treatments for anxiety and depression for people that live with the condition, or for loved ones that have it, as my wife and my son do. To find out more about our fundraiser, visit findinggeniusfoundation.org and click on current initiatives. And now to our guest.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have one of my board members today, a wonderful lady named Stephanie Berg. She's both an attorney and a naturopathic doctor licensed in California. She received her law degree from Stanford Law School and then a naturopathic medicine degree from Bastyr University, California, and a Bachelor of Arts from Princeton University. So I'm going to find out, the law part, where did that come from? And then the naturopathic doctor part, where did that come from? So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your background. Was law your first love, or was medicine your first love? Like, how did you get to where you are?
I went to law school right after graduating from college, and I quickly learned in law school that I'm not a litigator, and that was not my passion. But I loved working with contracts and businesses and doing transactional law. So I quickly learned that was my passion and did that for about 6 years at both law firms, and then worked as in-house counsel for a financial advising company in Los Angeles. And through my own health journey, discovered naturopathic medicine and just got it in my head that that was exactly what I wanted to do, and ended up going back to school. Had to do a year of post-bac pre-med work, which I didn't do in undergrad because I was focused on law, and so didn't do pre-med stuff. So I did that, and then ended up doing my 4 years at Bastyr in California. So it was sort of a winding journey, but now I'm excited to be combining them, practicing law, but working with my colleagues and naturopathic doctors, healthcare providers of all kinds.
Yeah, so the law portion, is that defending and working with naturopathic and other alternative healthcare practitioners, or is it separate?
Right now, the law, that is what I'm doing, working with healthcare practitioners. I don't do any litigation, so no defense or prosecution, but I do only business transactional regulatory work. So that would be everything from helping people form their corporations, or depending on what their business is, their LLCs, drafting patient forms, drafting all sorts of employment agreements, independent contractor agreements, really anything related to their business.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So keeping them from hopeful future liability.
Correct. That is my ultimate goal. That and helping them grow their businesses with confidence. Because I feel like oftentimes once people have the legal boundaries and knowledge about or legal foundations and structure to their business, that it actually helps them confidently grow their business.
Yeah. What are some of the issues that naturopaths, or I don't know if you deal with acupuncturists or, other kinds of alternative medicine doctors, like what are the issues they face? Is it industry or sub-industry or specialization specific, or is there some general stuff that you could talk about?
Great question. It's a little bit of both. I think there are some overarching issues that all businesses deal with and healthcare practices, things such as employment agreements or independent contractor arrangements. When is it appropriate to hire someone as an independent contractor versus an employee? If you are hiring employees, what do you need to get from them? What are the steps? What do you need to do as an employer? So there are definitely certain things that are faced by all sorts of business owners. And then there are certain practice specific things such as scope of practice, who can, like for naturopathic doctors in California, the scope is very specific. And naturopathic doctors, unfortunately, in California can't hire nurses and can't call themselves physicians. There are only certain types of procedures they can do. So dealing
they can't hire nurses? Why?
I know it's all very political, but no, unfortunately right now. And the reason for that is because nurses can only, in California, can only be supervised by physicians and under the Nursing Act. And so in California, naturopathic doctors cannot refer to themselves as physicians. So it's really just a very political thing. And every year the Naturopathic Doctors Association of California goes into the legislature to try to increase our scope. So, see what happens.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment. So, scope of work, I'll go to a chiropractor and, they're not allowed to do surgeries. They're not allowed to put their finger in your mouth to adjust, stuff in your mouth for the most part, what I've heard. So I guess scope is very important. What are some of the interesting or important limits of scope that various practitioners have?
Yeah, scope is very important. And really, I try to explain to people that it's important because each state has a desire or a goal, and also that goal and desire to protect the consumers within their state. And so they decide and determine who has the right, whether we like it or not, who has the sufficient skill and education and training and qualifications to treat people and do certain things, certain treatments and procedures. And so as you noted, like chiropractors, there are certain limits on what they can do. I'm most familiar with California. So, familiar with what chiropractors can do and nurse practitioners and NDs and all of the mid-level practitioners versus what medical doctors can do. And scope of practice is really important, especially with integrative practitioners or integrative healthcare offices where you have lots of different practitioners working together. And, some people may get comfortable and do things that maybe are outside of scope. And so it's very important in those sorts of situations to make sure everyone knows what their role is and stays within their scope of practice to avoid any unlicensed practice issues.
So how is your time divided? How much lawyering are you doing versus practicing yourself as an ND?
Oh, actually, I no longer am practicing as an ND, just full-time lawyering, which I actually love. I decided I wanted to do the lawyering very well, and I felt like medicine and law are both full-time professions. And
so
it was just too much to divide my time. But I actually feel like I'm helping naturopathic medicine or helping integrative health care practitioners and helping people more through using my legal skills than I was as a new baby doctor. As I'm sure you are very familiar because you work with other lawyers, but there's a lot of on-the-job learning. And my now 8 years, I took a little hiatus going to naturopathic medical school, so I guess it would have been 13 years of practice as a lawyer. But I did practice a little bit while I was in law school. But so let's say my 8-ish years practicing full-time as a lawyer, I feel a lot more confident with my legal skills than my naturopathic medicine skills. Because
you have your naturopathic doctor credentials, how does that help you with the law portion? I'm sure there's other lawyers out there that are healthcare lawyers or do what you do, but they don't have your background. So what benefits do you think it gives you?
I feel like I actually speak the same language as my clients. So they can tell me exactly what types of procedures they're doing or how their office is working or what their goals are in terms of starting an online business or, working with patients. And there's no extra background research on my part needed. I pretty much know and understand who they are, what they're doing, and I speak their language. So I feel like I'm a little bit of a translator between the legalese and the doctor speak.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on support us. We have 3 levels of membership, from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click support us today. Now back to the show.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm sure that's a major help to you getting business because, if I was a healthcare practitioner and I saw that you also had that degree, I'd be like, wow, that's great. And I would assume, again, you'd understand me a lot better.
I love it. And I feel very grateful, truly, to be able to do this and love my clients. I mean, it's every day getting to work with people that my colleagues, really, and friends in school and meeting new doctors of all sorts and all types of different people. So I am truly very grateful to be able to do this.
Yeah, no, that's great. So what issues do you see are happening, now or over the past unfortunate, year and a half with all this craziness going on? What's changed with the alternative healthcare profession?
Well, I think telemedicine was something that was obviously was already in place, but certainly over the last 2 years has really skyrocketed, and most every healthcare professional now has some familiarity or extensive familiarity and experience with telemedicine. And that was actually one of my focus areas when I was in school, learning the law about telemedicine, because it was an area I for myself, just if I was going to practice, thought would be important. So telemedicine is one of my specialties, and I talk to a lot of people about that. Naturopathic doctors, one of my main clientele, have a little bit of a different situation when it comes to telemedicine, simply because naturopathic doctors are not licensed in every state. So the basic rule of telemedicine is that you need to be licensed in the state where the patient is located at the time of the visit. So for acupuncturists and MDs, nurse practitioners, they have the ability to get licensed in every state. But when I work with my indie clients, it's a little bit of a different situation. So I guess to answer your question, telemedicine, and we're moving online, doing group education courses and programs. These are the things that have really picked up over the last year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah, telemedicine just didn't make sense. The old rules, I don't know. It just seemed like you couldn't go out of state and you couldn't do this. I know it seems like they've loosened a lot of restrictions, but what were the old restrictions and what are they now?
Well, actually, they haven't really loosened the restrictions very much. The law still is you need to be licensed in the state where the patient's located. But the various executive orders that were issued by certain states when COVID hit, or in March, April of 2020, they're very specific, and a lot of them just provide waivers for certain healthcare professionals who were not licensed in the state to come in and work in a hospital to provide treatment for COVID, or have certain lesser requirements to get a license in the state, but they really didn't open up the laws in any way with respect to licensure. What did happen is CMS lessened the requirements for Medicare to pay for telemedicine. So prior to COVID, the person had to be in a rural area, and the patient had to be in a rural area and had to be in a specific location. They had to be in the same state as the doctor in order for Medicare to pay for telemedicine. And CMS said, okay, no, we're going to get rid of that requirement. We'll still pay for it even if you're not located in the same state and if you're not in a rural area. But the state licensure laws still apply. So the doctor still needs to be licensed in the state where the patient's located. And the federal government they're not able to override the state licensure laws. Hopefully, there have been some movements to change the law. So it's the law where the doctor is licensed that applies, but that didn't go anywhere because it's really just all about consumer protection. So the states have the right to control and determine who's qualified to treat people within their borders. So right now, it's really just that ultimately, if you wanted to see people, or if a practitioner who's licensed wants to treat people in a state outside of where they're licensed, they should most likely apply for a licensure in another state. There are efforts underway to make it a lot easier for people to apply for multiple licenses, but it'll be interesting how it changes over the years.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
So what are some of the major forces going on? We're near the end of 2021. What do you see the major forces in play for alternative healthcare practitioners? What's happening to them lately?
It's interesting with the have to be somewhat careful about what you say online. That seems to be an issue for some alternative healthcare providers. We see all the vaccine mandates. So that's certainly an issue that's coming up in the various states with healthcare providers who've been on the list of under mandates for required vaccinations. So that's been a hot topic in the various states. And then, I think people are just continuing to grow their businesses online. Some people are moving wholly online and not even having in-care office setting anymore, just depending on what their specialty is. So I do see a lot of that.
Well, some of them, it'll be impossible to do that. Chiropractor, acupuncturist, when you lay hands on people. But some of them, I guess you could. Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know, going forward, do you see that more people are embracing alternative medicine or less, or what's the dynamic? Is if I just call it a profession as an umbrella, is it growing? Is it diminishing? What's changing with it?
I think it's growing. And I think a lot of healthcare professionals are seeking additional education in things like functional medicine and nutrition. I do feel like it's growing, and I feel like consumers want more of that, not just a pill for every ill, but really trying to get healthy from the inside out.
So even though you're not a litigator and you don't deal with the negative consequences, you could still help a lot of alternative health practitioners to make sure they're doing everything by the book and they don't get themselves in trouble, or at least reduce their risk exposure, right?
Exactly. That is exactly what I do. Things like, making sure they know what types of treatments are the most risky, certain things like stem cells and exosomes, which the FDA says are illegal if they're not under an investigation of a new drug application. Doesn't mean that there aren't people out there doing it. So I really want to make sure that my clients understand, what the risks are and what things are legal or within their scope, and then make sure they have all of the right informed consent documents, as well as understanding the need to give patients full informed consent about the risks and benefits of the treatments they're recommending. So really, yes, my goal is to keep them out of litigation from patients, malpractice suits, help with keep them out of litigation for employment matters, regulatory issues with both FTC, FDA, all of those things. And I actually I'll do a lot of work with the California Naturopathic Doctors Association as well, bi-weekly Facebook Lives, bi-monthly, to try to educate about what are the potential risks here and how to protect yourselves. Here are some legal issues to think about, trying to get the word out.
If there is litigation, what kind of a lawyer would help an alternative healthcare practitioner? I say it because I would guess that, there's probably a significant number of those type of people that listen to this podcast and have been on the podcast. So that's why I asked, what do they do if they sense or they are getting themselves into legal trouble? What kind of a lawyer should they?
Depending on the legal trouble, it would be a defense attorney or a malpractice attorney who is really familiar with defending people in front of the medical boards, the acupuncture board, the naturopathic board, the chiropractor board, as well as in court. So yeah, defense attorney, hopefully it wouldn't be a criminal matter, but if it is, then a criminal defense attorney. And I always recommend that any alternative healthcare provider has malpractice insurance.
Oh, are you ever called in as co-counsel? Because again, like you said, you speak their language, and it might make the interaction with the malpractice lawyer more fluid or help in preparation to defend oneself in front of a board?
Yes, I have assisted, just with the naturopathic issues as counsel in that regard. So yes, that is certainly something I can do. I would prefer my clients be represented in front of a court or board by someone who probably has more experience in defense litigation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, very good. So Stephanie, where's the best, how can people reach you and find you if they need your help? Where can they go? StephanieBergLaw.com, and I can be reached at sberg@StephanieBergLaw.com. If they are members of the California Naturopathic Doctors Association, if there are any of those on here, or California Naturopathic Doctors, I'd encourage them to sign up for the CNDA and support the CNDA in promoting naturopathic doctors in the naturopathic doctor scope. And in terms of what I do, like I mentioned, anything and everything related to your business as a healthcare provider, employment agreements, independent contractor agreements, helping you set up any other contractual arrangements, management services agreements, patient forms, forming LLCs and professional corporations, and patient programs, website documents and review. So any and all of that stuff to help keep you out of trouble is my passion, and love
I love doing it, love working with healthcare providers, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, and last thing, so Berg is B-E-R-G, right?
Thank you. Yes, like iceberg without the ice.
Okay, very good. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure speaking with you and working with you.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.